I'm in charge of offering a brief overview of the charter school movement. But before I do that, I would like to begin with, by reading to you a quotation, a brief quotation from one of my favorite people, Albert Einstein. He commenting on why he joined the American Federation of Teachers, he said, "I consider it important, indeed urgently necessary, for intellectual workers to get together, both to protect their own economic stand and also, generally speaking, to secure their influence in the political field." I think you will agree that both intellectual and manual workers are today more than ever in urgent need to exert more influence in the political field. We are under attack, and the charter school movement is but the latest, and I feel a very important battle that we need to fight. No society can perdure without a system of education, and today in the information age, education plays a central role in the reproduction of the system. That's why I think the interest of this corporate movement to take over our public school system. So I will begin with a brief history of how charter schools started. And well, we should know that the charter school movement was launched by two educators with impeccable liberal credentials. Okay, they were Albert Schagner and Ray Booth. Schagner was president of the United Federation of Teachers from '64 to '85, and president of the American Federation of Teachers from 1975 to 1997. Booth was a teacher, a junior high principal, and a teacher of educational administration at the University of Massachusetts. Both believed that autonomous public schools run by teachers freed from school bureaucracies would improve pupil learning and increase learning opportunities for all. In 1974, Booth presented his ideas for the organization of school districts to the Society for General Systems in a paper entitled Education by Charter. His idea was, today it would seem to us extremely naive, but his paper, the paper that he wrote, is a story of how a superintendent, on his own initiative, transforms his district into what we said earlier, an autonomous enterprise run by teachers, okay, freed from all bureaucratic encumbrances. His paper, however interesting it was, remained largely unknown until 1988. In 1988, the idea of autonomous teacher-run schools gained general acceptance when it was enthusiastically endorsed by more than 3,000 teachers at the 70th Convention of the American Federation of Teachers, led by Schagner, here in San Francisco. Shanker? Thank you for the pronunciation. Shanker. All right. As we can expect, the idea was initially opposed by the political and the educational establishment. Community-based, teacher-run charter schools formed across the nation. In 1991, the first charter school law was enacted in Minnesota, and the next year, California enacted the 1992 California Charter School Act. In 1993, 29 charter schools opened in California. Today, we have more than 1,200 K-12 schools serving more than 500,000 students. That's close to 9% of the student population in California. In West Contra Costa Unified School District, last school year, charter schools enrolled 4,577 students in 11 charter schools. By the coming school year, charter school enrollment is expected to be around 5,000 students, That should be close again to about 15% of the district student population. Now, despite the propitious start, the liberal utopian dream of teacher-run community-based charters did not last long. Okay, we should keep this in mind, because I've heard from some charter advocates say, oh my God, charter schools were started by 2 teachers of impeccable credentials. Well, let me tell you something. Those 2 teachers with impeccable credentials, 6 years later, they became the harshest critics of the charter school movement. Schachner? Schachner. I'm going to call him Al, okay? Okay, in his column, Where We Stand, of July 3rd, 1994, that was a weekly column that he had in the New York Times, he denounced the Detroit school system for, quote, giving $4 million, for starters, to a group of people who are eager for public funds but could care less about public education. He argued that charters could not operate totally unconnected to the school district that sponsors them. He denounced corporate educators, saying, but there are other supporters of charter schools whose real aim is to smash the public school. Unless charter school legislation is carefully crafted, charter schools will not lead to improved public education. Instead, we will see money used to pay for educating kids whose parents are already looking after their education at home, or to finance what are really private schools. And all this will take place without any public debate and totally out of the public eye. Prophetic words, I think. Boudet continued to champion the idea of charter schools, and like Al, he upheld the notion that charter schools should operate well within the public school system and should never be thought as alternatives to public education. Now, we need to understand that this charter school movement is heavily financed and well publicized. They have conducted a well-structured, well-orchestrated public relations campaign. The core of that campaign is the notion that charter schools are public schools. Why are they public schools? You know, we ask them, why are they public schools? They say, well, we receive public funds. But obviously, that's not reason. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry receives, in their operating budgets, I mean, their R&D budget is more than 60, 70% or more financed by the, with public funds. But yet, the pharmaceutical industry is not a public industry. So they are entitled, as under this legal facade, this legal fiction that they are public schools, to federal categorical funds for which their students are eligible. They receive Title I, special education money, and general fund money. Federal legislation provides grants to help charters to manage startup costs. The public character of charter schools is based solely, as I said earlier, on the fact that they receive public money. And I don't need to quote, well, I will quote that educator that we all know, Ravitch. He observed that receiving public money does not make a business a public one. So behind the legal fiction that charters are publics lies a conception of the public sphere centered on market economic relations. Let's keep that in mind, okay? They are trying to impose on all of society the template of the market system. So we choose a school in the same way that we choose any other consumer good. I think Todd, he present called that the Walmart model of education. You know, you shop for goods, you shop for vacuum cleaners and microwaves, and you also shop for different types of schools, different school systems. That's obviously not the case, okay? Choosing who are you going to entrust your kids with for 12 years or so, it's not the same type of choice as what microwave oven are you going to buy. Though the microwave oven may also last you 10 years or 5 years, okay? It's not the same choice, it's not the same thing. Charter school critics and detractors, however, focus on governance issues. And that's what we should keep in mind. What makes a public school, what gives it its public character, is that it is run by an elected school board who makes decisions regarding the expenditure of tax-generated revenues and is subject to recall by taxpayers. Just take a look at their websites, take a look at the Aspire charters, take a look at the Caliber, and see who's on their board. It's Goldman Sachs all over again, okay? It's Goldman Sachs all over again. In the Caliber school board, with the exception of one individual, all of the board members are bankers in functions, hedge fund managers, or former Goldman Sachs executives. Now I would like to say something about something that is very important and is at the core of the issue of charter schools in our district, and that is the financial impact of charter schools. Last year, okay, with, like I said earlier, 4,577 students enrolled, charter schools received approximately $35 million for the concept of average daily attendance. This figure I calculated on the average of $7,647 per student per year, okay? In reality, I think the figure is a bit higher because high schools, they receive funds from other sources, and the high school ADA hovers around 10,000. So it is a conservative figure that last year, just on average daily attendance, they received $35 million. Now, keep in mind that the district, okay, with tax-generated revenues, must also pay the salaries of teachers, administrators, staff, instructional materials, professional development, etc., all out of general fund, local control funding formula funds, and Title I. Last year, that amounted to $46 million. So you add up 46 and 35, and that's the amount of the subsidy that our public school system paid to this corporate educational reform project, okay? So that added up last year to $81 million. Now, there are a number of charter school petitions already waiting to be reviewed by the staff and by the school board. These are a petition from Caliber to expand its operations. They want to have a high school, and this looks very nice. I'm sure they're going to petition for something like this, okay? They probably will want to start small, okay, just a few classrooms. I'm sure they can convince the principal and the school board to just make a little room, okay? Make a little room. And they will probably end up like the Leadership Public School. I don't know if you know where Leadership Public School is. It's downtown, a couple blocks from Bissell Street. They're in a brand new building. They have been in a brand new building since they started. My last 5 years in this district, I taught at North Campus in deplorable conditions, okay? Deplorable, I mean worse than, portable units, while the charter school was housed in a brand new building downtown. So if these charter petitions from Caliber, the one from Voices was already approved, Rocket Ship, Invictus, KEEP, and Uplift are approved, the economic impact on our general fund will be approximately $40 million, plus another $30 million from ADA, that's another $70 million. So we add up all these figures, the current subsidy of $81 million. If we add to that the expected increase from pending petitions, the subsidy to the charter franchises will add up to $151 million. That's almost half the budget, the total budget of our district. Okay? If you want to take a peek at one of the possible future scenarios for our district, let's look next door at Oakland, okay? Where 49, I don't have the exact figures for all the levels, but I do know for sure that 49% of the high school students are enrolled in charters. Close to 40-something% of middle schools in Oakland are enrolled in charters. And their influence in the administration of the districts can be felt at all levels and in all departments, okay? Another example, somebody else I know is going to talk about the LA experience, which, just to give you a figure, they take about $500 million, $500 million from our budget. Now, what has been done? The United Teachers of Richmond last year, before the current administration, declaring itself advocates for well-resourced, community-centered, publicly funded, and democratically managed schools. The elected representative council of UTR, CTA, NEA, passed in 2016 a resolution calling for a moratorium on charter school expansion. It read, "Be it resolved that the United Teachers of Richmond opposes charter school expansion in the West Contra Costa Unified School District and the nation." Same year, the NAACP convention voted and approved a call for a moratorium on charter school expansion and strengthening oversight and governance and practice. It read in part, "Be it resolved that the NAACP reaffirms its 2014 resolution called School Privatization, Threat to Public Education, in which the NAACP opposes the privatization of public schools and or public subsidizing of for-profit charter schools. And be it further resolved that the NAACP hereby supports a moratorium on the proliferation of privately managed charter schools." Just a couple of weeks ago, in the 2017 NEA Representative Assembly passed a resolution critical of the business model, the market model followed by charter schools. I believe Kristen Jones will address directly the NEA convention, but they stopped, although they were critical in many respects. The resolution, which I have here in front of me, is really a mess of confusing statements, okay? They categorically state that charter schools have not improved performance. They categorically state that the model that they're following doesn't work and is discredited, and yet they continue to make an academic distinction between charter schools, okay? There are good charter schools and there are bad charter schools. There are charter schools that are privately managed and we don't like most of them. There are charter schools that are not privately managed and we like some of them. And so it's really hard to pinpoint them on anything. The point of the matter is that they are playing along and they refuse to take a stand. Under the heading of strategic recommendations, their task force recommended its affiliates to develop a strategic plan to advance, quote, "the requirement that charters be authorized only by local democratically elected entities, and only if charters meet the same basic safeguards and standards as public schools." But as we know, there is no mechanism, there is nothing that has been instituted or implemented that has done anything to make charters follow the law. We have a 1992 California Charter School Act that the legislative intent of which is aimed to accomplish improving pupil learning, to increase learning opportunities for all pupils, with special emphasis on expanded learning experiences for pupils who are identified as academically low achieving, encourage the use of different and innovative teaching methods, create new professional opportunities for teachers, including the opportunity to be responsible for the learning programs at the school site. Challenging, right? I mean, who could be against a school that, offers the opportunity to teachers to be in charge of the learning programs? Provide parents and pupils with expanded choices, including the types of educational opportunities, create new professional opportunities for teachers, etc. Now, a cursory examination of all available data, and I would challenge anyone to prove the contrary, will show that charter schools in our district fall short of meeting the intent of the Charter School Act of 1992. I mean, they just don't do it. Now, why? Well, I think that banking on its wealth, banking on the political clout that wealth means, the charter school movement simply refuses to follow the law. And school districts, officials, and school boards simply lack the political will to enforce existing legislation. Okay? They lack the political will to do it. There are currently 3 pieces of legislation pending, and what they are doing is just framing the debate, the discussion on charter schools around 2 issues, basically: accountability or moratorium. Okay? We have, and that's what these propositions do. SB 808, this proposed legislation, AB 1360, prohibits discriminatory charter school admission. The one I mentioned earlier, SB 808, requires that all charter school petitions be approved by the school board. AB 1478 states that charter schools and entities managing charter schools are subject to the Brown Act and other laws pertaining to prevent conflict of interest, political reform, and the government code 1090. Now, while desirable in themselves, these proposed bills do not go far enough. The growth of charters in West Contra Costa USD represents a serious threat to the financial viability and will only continue to increase already existing inequities. The privatization, and I think the more technically accurate term is corporatization. Okay? The corporatization of our public school system must be challenged head-on. Charter school encroachment must be stopped with a moratorium to begin with, not slowed down with toothless legislation. Okay? When somebody's robbing from you, when somebody's stealing from you, of course you want to know how much they've stolen from you, but you want them to stop. And eventually you want to lock them up. Okay? But right now what we can do is to try to stop them, okay, with a moratorium. At a later time, we will deal with the legislation necessary to end this disgraceful experiment. So rather than encouraging charters to behave in a socially responsible manner, why not work toward finding an effective way to transform public schools so that they serve all children? I would like to end my comments with another quotation. This is from an essay by Bellamy Foster called "Education and the Structural Crisis of Capital," which I believe points in the right direction. He says, "The strategic goal of a resistance movement to public school privatization should not simply be to defend the existing school system, but to make use of this state of emergency to create the basis of a truly revolutionary approach to the education process based on community schools. We need to engage our children in the community building process, including education, with the same audacity with which the civil rights movement engaged them in desegregation activities. When this country was struggling, when this country was fighting against segregation in our school system, I never heard any civil rights leader say, hey, wait a minute. There are some segregated schools that are good schools. Huh? They have good programs. So let's preserve it. Let's not attack them. Let's focus on the segregated schools that are low-performing schools. That's nonsense, okay? And it is, and let's not be afraid of saying, it is an ideological position. It is an ideological position. This is a game of ideas, and ideas put into practice, and practices that run against our interests. So it is. So our opposition to charter school is ideological, and it is practical, and it is personal. It affects us, and it affects our families. So, once again, thank you very much for being here. And,